Hello everyone and welcome back to another Rise of Myth Cthulhu video. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the expansion characters and one that's very unique, the Gambler. The Gambler uses a lot of different mechanics. There's a lot going in on this, so please do stay with me. But if you like to just let the dice decide how you're going to play the game and not worry too much about all the thinking and the heavy lifting, Gambler could be pretty fun for you. And there is a more mega brain version way of playing this deck, which I'm going to be more than happy to share with you. But for now, we're going to just jump into the class relic and start discussing this interesting class. So, the Gambler has a unique mechanic, and it's about being lucky or jinxed. I'll talk about that first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the stats and stuff. We've got 11 HP and 9 sanity, which are pretty good, and if you've watched some of our other videos, you'll know how I feel about those kinds of pools. But the key thing we got here is at the start of the round, we roll a dice, and if we roll between 7 and 10, we're lucky. If we roll anything else, we're jinxed. What does that even mean? So, effectively, at the start of the round, we grab our 2 dice and we roll them. And this will tell us exactly what our situation is. And as you can see, I'm Mr. Unlucky. I always get this way whenever I play the Gambler. But there is a solution to that, and we will go through the options of how to play if you're unlucky. We also have this nice little chip to tell us when we're lucky and when we're sad, or jinxed in this case. And that's going to have an impact on a bunch of our cards and effects and our abilities to output damage. It's a challenge with the Gambler, as you're not entirely sure how your turn's going to play out, and you already have a lot of randomness in the deck building stages. So a big part of that is we're going to be learning how to effectively cheat and make sure that we resolve things the way that we want to. And in the event that we do get things to go the way that they should, we end up getting way more for our energy values in terms of stats and damage output than we would if we just played normally. But the Amulet of Fortune is a really weird class relic because it's not technically a benefit. When you're lucky, there are certain cards that will behave in ways that make them much, much better. But when you're jinxed, there's a lot of drawbacks. So you've got a class relic that doesn't necessarily always give you the easiest time playing, and you don't know how to gauge exactly what's going to happen in any given turn, which can make multiplayer a little bit chaotic. But again, if you don't want to think too hard about the smashy stuff, just rolling the dice and saying, I'll decide what's going to happen. It's a fun way to play the game. Let's take a look at the basic deck. I will go out and pull out all of the unique cards and we'll go through them so that you get an idea of what we're starting with. If I remember correctly, there should be 8 unique cards. So we'll go ahead and flip these. Okay, yes. We'll start with the attacks because killing stuff means that it doesn't hit you back, and I generally like to start there. We start off with Direct Hit, which is a 2 energy melee attack that deals 3 attack if we're lucky and only attacks for 2 if we're jinxed. The other drawback to this card is that -1 blue flame, which means if we discard it for energy, so we just go ahead and discard it, we would only get 1 energy instead of 2, which means it's not very good for playing other 2 energy cards. 3 attack for 2 on a basic card is pretty, well, it's kind of what we'd expect when we're playing other classes, right? If we're playing the Detective, we have Kick. If we're playing the Possessed, we have Whiplash, I believe. I will double check that. But there's a lot of options. We kind of expect 3 for 2. And this is a bit of a weird one because we don't have any extra conditions to get the extra point of damage, where in solo you pretty much always get that 3 points of damage. In this case, you can just get it even if you're a multiplayer. Direct Hit is okay. It's one that you probably don't want in your deck later, simply because it only discards for 1 energy, and your basic cards get outclassed very, very quickly if you play through these runs. So I'd advise trying to get things that don't give you 2 energy out of the deck pretty quickly if they're understated. And the key thing that you're looking for is 2 points of stats for every point of energy you put in. That's a very, very good ratio, and that'll see you through the normal modes of the game. And if you get a better exchange than that, then the card is very, very good. But Direct Hit, it will do in the early stages, but if you are unlucky, like we were when we rolled our dice at the start of this video, we're going to run into a lot of times where this is just, you're overpaying for 2 attack, and then if you just try to use it as energy because it's not efficient that turn, you're only getting 1 energy. So Direct Hit is not a great card. It'll help you fight some common enemies, but you don't really want to be playing this in the later stages of the game. Flip side to that is Chain Strike. Now, Chain Strike is a 1 energy attack 1. If you're lucky, you inflict a vulnerability and you gain 1 energy. So vulnerabilities are these green tokens. You just go ahead and place them on the ghoulie that you punched in the face, and you deal an extra point of damage the next time you deal damage to that source. So effectively, this card is 2 damage for 1 energy. You do have to follow up on it, which is a lot easier in multiplayer or by yourself. This is really, really good, and also refunds you your energy. So effectively, you get 2 damage for 0 energy at the cost of this card. Only if you're lucky. If you are jinxed, this card is just attack 1. So you will start to see where some of the challenges with the Gambler come in with how swingy your cards are depending on what your state is. Next, we're going to take a look at a attack and a defense. So basically, these purple cards mean that if there's ever a card that references an attack or a defense, this will count for both. And this is a simple bet. So this is a unique mechanic to the Gambler. Effectively, when you play this, you can take the initial effect, which you shouldn't because it's always terrible. You can roll 2 dice, and in this case, if our success range is between 5 and 9, and if we're successful, this effect will replace our attack 1 and defense 1. We get to assign 4 points between attack and defense, so we can just go 4 attack for 2 energy, which is great, or 2 attack, 2 defense, or 4 defense. However, if we roll anything other than the range of 5 to 9, we get attack 1, so we actually get worse than if we'd have just taken the attack 1 and defense 1. These cards there's a lot of them in here, and I will talk about the bet build that you can do with the Gambler. The thing with these is that they are wildly swingy. In many cases, you are getting above the energy values, but on the lose cases, you are getting way below your energy values. So they're very difficult to play. There are a couple of cards and items that will help you increase the consistency of playing these bet cards. And there's 2 types of bet. There's a simple bet and there's a risky bet, and we'll cover that when we get into it. But you're going to end up in a lot of situations where you're sat around the multiplayer table and your friends say, hey, what can you do this turn? And your answer is going to be, I don't know. We'll find out, which is exactly what your teammates are always going to want in a cooperative setting when you don't have a plan until you start playing your cards. So, lucky maneuver, at worst, it is 2 energy for discard, so you can use it in the later stages of the game to pay for some of your reward cards. It's also a simple bet card, and there's quite a few cards that interact with the betting strategy. Still, being able to have this is pretty useful in the later stages of the game, even if you don't ever end up actually playing it. Next up, we have our defensive options. No Looking Back is a defense card. It gives defense 1 for 1 energy, and then we inflict a vulnerability and a stun on one enemy targeting us. If we're jinxed, we lose a sanity. So this one's we got a little bit more control over. I really like this card. So we haven't talked about stun yet. So stun, when you put that on an enemy, the players get to choose who that enemy is going to attack. In the event that you're playing solo, it just counts as a vulnerability. So when you play this, you get defense 1, and the next enemy is going to take +2 damage in solo, which is really good. It means we're getting 3 points of stats for 1 energy. Now, if we're jinxed, that will cost us a sanity, which is expensive. We do have to take into consideration what our negative drawback is if we're insane, and it's not actually that bad on the Gambler. If we roll the same value on both of our bet dice, we get a prison, which is fine. It means if the bet card we play is the last card that we play, we never suffer the loss of the prison, because we remember the prison status effect deals 1 damage before that character attacks. So if you don't attack, you don't suffer the drawback. And, if we're not playing the bet cards, we also don't get prisoned. So it's not terrible being insane, obviously, aside from the drawback of enemies getting various buffs and additional damage against you if you are insane, and you losing the game if your sanity is 0 at the end of the turn and the combat is still rolling. No Looking Back is a great card. There's some really great synergies with vulnerabilities. This class is very good for setting up vulnerability strategy, and we're going to look into that in a little bit more detail when we start getting to the reward cards, when it all starts coming together. Our next defense card is That Was a Close Call. It's a simple bet card, which has an energy cost of 1. It is defense 1 for 1, so not great. But on a roll of 4 to 10, which is a very big range, we get attack 1 and defense 1. That does replace the defense 1, so we're then getting 2 points of stats for 1 energy, which is actually in range. If we fail, we switch to Jinx, we get an energy, so we don't lose the energy cost for this card, but we do lose a sanity, which is quite expensive, and especially if you're playing the betting strategy, you don't really want to risk getting random prison effects on you, because you're insane and you're rolling the same number on 2 dice. High Self-Esteem is a really good card. It's just 2 energy for defense 3. If we're lucky, we get to discard a condition affecting us. This is great for a starter card. It's a lot of defense. It's still under the energy range that we want, because that's probably what we're going to get from our reward cards, but the Effector take off conditions from us if we're lucky, just adds extra value, but it doesn't matter if we're jinxed when we play this, we're still getting defense free. And there's discards for 2 energy later when you want to start playing your reward cards. All in all, this is a great defensive option, and I'm a huge fan of this one, and I'm quite happy to leave this in my deck the entirety of the run. There are plenty of times where just being able to remove random status effects can prevent you from taking catastrophic damage, so huge fan of high self-esteem. You should just have that in general though, right? You should just generally have high self-esteem. It makes you feel better. And look, you can smile just like this man with his open shirt. And he's obviously not somebody who's been tilted by rolling way too many low numbers on their bet dice and losing all of their sanity. Next, we're going to come up to our skill cards. I'm going to take a look at Winds of Change first. So Winds of Change is a 0 energy card that has +1 blue flame. That means it discards for 1 energy. This card is incredible. Skill, Change Your Luck. And you'll start to see how the strategy starts coming together. Being able to decide when we are lucky or jinxed, both states are important. We'll get over that in the rewards, and I'll keep teasing it. I keep saying, the dragons are coming, the dragons are coming. But I promise we will actually get there. But this is really, really good because it gives us more control over what we're doing, regardless of how we rolled the dice at the start of the turn. And it also just discards for 1 energy if you're in the state that you already want, which is not too bad. Lastly, we have the item In the Moment, which is a 0 energy consumable. So it means after we play it, we remove it from our deck for the rest of that fight, and it gets shuffled back in at the end of the encounter. It's a consumable, it draws 2 cards. This will always draw 2 cards, which means this is always really good to play. If we're lucky, we gain an energy. So we just get an energy and 2 cards for nothing. So this card becomes absolutely insane if we're lucky. If we're jinxed, we lose a sanity for those 2 draws. We can already see in our base kit we've got quite a few ways of losing sanity, so we probably don't want to be playing this if we're jinxed. We are in a situation where in the earlier stages of the game you may not have a choice, but anytime you get to play this when you're lucky is leads to very, very strong turns, and it gets you through your deck faster, which means you're going to find your reward cards a lot quicker. So with that in mind, that covers all of the basic deck. We're going to take a look at the class items next, as that's a part of what happens when we're playing solo. So I'll briefly explain what this card is and why it's relevant to you. However, if you are playing in cooperative, you'll get your class item from buying it using your progress points that you're going to be earning along the way. It's pretty much up to you how many points you want to spend on this, whether or not there's a particular class item that you want to choose. This is one of the classes that I would consider using that, as you want to go into the start of the game with a defined build regardless of what rewards are being offered to you. You want to try and force either the betting build or the choose your fate build. I would strongly not recommend just trying to figure it out as you go along, as that's going to end up resulting in you potentially ending up with a really mismatched deck and then luck not working out for you. So this card here is the card we get if we're playing solo. If we're playing multiplayer, we will not get access to this card. It's double-sided, and we get to choose one of these sides at the beginning of the game. Once we've chosen, it stays this way in front of us and gives us a benefit. The starting boost is the one I recommend to any new players if you've not played a class before and you want to get like the best experience of how that class works and the kind of tips and tricks that you can do when you're doing deck building. This is a great one to consider. This gives us a random class item. We get an extra +2 health, and we get to replace 2 starter cards with 2 random common cards. So we can take out some of the cards that we're not super excited about, and then we get random extra common cards, which will increase our deck's starting power, and it gives us a little bit more survivability. And we've got pretty healthy pools on both of these as it is. This is really, really good, and when you get more familiar with the game, or if you like to live dangerously, which I assume you do, if you decided to sit down and play the gambler, you've already made a decision that you want things to be difficult. This path gives you a random class item, and that's the only benefit you get until you start beating servant level enemies. When you do, you start getting uncommon cards instead of common cards, so this is going to result in your deck quality being much, much better by the time you get to the Great Old One, especially when you start proceeding through Act 2 and then getting towards the second Great Old One that you're going to be fighting in a particular run. This is very, very powerful, but again, it does come with the fact that you are going to have your starting tools, and then you're going to have to make the most of them until you start getting up to around encounter 5 is when servant level enemies start appearing. And they don't appear at every single fight, but they appear frequently enough for you to have a good pool of uncommon cards by the time you get to your first Great Old One fight. Our class items, we have 4, and I'll just go ahead and spit them out, and we'll go through them one by one. Weighted die. If we're lucky, we may add or deduct 1 from the result of our simple bet. This gives us a much higher success range on our bet cards, which is helpful. The part that's not so helpful is that we only get to use this if we're lucky. So if we roll poorly and we're jinxed and we have no way of changing our fate, for example, such as our coin, we end up not getting any class item, and we also don't have a successful relic. So this is a bit of a difficult one to use. Once you have enough cards that force you into the lucky status, this means that your bet cards are much more likely to go off. It's also a good one if you want to start taking risky bets. We'll take a look at one of those cards later, but with a risky bet, you effectively have 2 sections to bet on them, and they've got quite narrow ranges for success. And you can take the first one, and then if you succeed or if you lose, you can choose to take the second one, and that's even harder to achieve. But the risky bets, whichever one you get, it replaces the first one. So if you take the first roll, you get the first effect. If you're a success and you say, hey, I'm going to take the riskier one, and you failed the second one, the failed one will take precedence. So weighted dice can help you with some of those cards. It is only add or deduct 1, so it will never make a Snake Eyes or a double 6 a success. So do keep that in mind. I'm not crazy about this class item, to be honest. I think there are better options, but again, I'm not very successful with the betting cards. I am horrendously unlucky whenever I played this class with the betting cards. And so weighted dice, not my favorite class item, but it can definitely help if you want to go in that betting build. Horseshoe is a really good one because it doesn't care if we're lucky or jinxed. Whenever we roll a 7 on a bet, we get to draw a card. I generally don't play the betting strategy too often. Obviously, I try to give it a try every now and again because it can be a bunch of fun when you have wild ranges on what your damage outputs are or what your defensive capabilities are. But this one's pretty solid because regardless of what state you're in, it can effectively always give you an extra card. So this is a pretty good one in the betting strategy. If you roll anything other than a 7, you're just effectively playing without a class item, which can make you a bit weaker than the other classes, so that's something to consider. The Consolation Prize, however, is one of my favorite class items for this character. At the start of your turn, you may lose 1 sanity and change your luck. This means we can force ourselves into lucky, which then means our chain strikes start looking really, really pretty. It means that our early direct hits and a lot of our other cards where we want to be lucky, we can control that. This is also quite useful when you've got cards that say, if you are jinxed, do something cool, because we can force ourselves into the jinx status effect. This is a great item. It's probably the best class item for the Gambler. I can't really see myself, if I have a choice, ever choosing the other two over Consolation Prize. This effect is just really, really powerful. Lastly, our commemorative chip is a interesting item that says if we're jinxed, so as long as we're unlucky, we can add or deduct 2 from the result of our risky bets. So risky bets are cards that have much better value per stat, but obviously the success range is really low. So in order to use this, we need to be unlucky, and then we need to be playing our risky bets, which we don't have any in our original deck. We're going to have to get those from our reward cards. So this one's a lot harder to play. Being able to add or remove 2 from those cards means that you make the success range a little bit more manageable, so you can play that lefty-loosey kind of strategy. But I really prefer Consolation Prize. If I ever get a choice of any of these, I'm choosing Consolation Prize. The others are all kind of tricky to use because you have to be playing the betting strategy, which is a choice, considering the other option is a Choose Your Fate build, which I'm much more of a fan of. Right, with that all said and done, let's take a look at some of those reward cards that I've been teasing. So we're going to start with the common rewards, and I'm going to just go ahead and pull out 3 of these cards, and we'll take a look at them. So I picked cards that are going to show off both builds. There are so many cards that I'd like to show you, but I don't want to spoil the entire game for you, so let's take a look. As I'm Mr. Unlucky, I like to look at the baseball bat, and this is like the cornerstone for the Choose Your Fate build. It's a 2 energy card that discards for 1 less energy, but you're never discarding this. You always want to play this in front of you. It's a melee attack with 2 uses, so each time you play it, you leave it in front of you with 2 uses. Each time you use it, you remove 1. When it hits 0, you just chuck it in the discard pile, and you'll eventually draw it again. This gives you attack 2, so this is effectively 4 attack for 2 energy, which is great. It's across 2 turns though, so that's also worth keeping in mind. If we're lucky, we get +2 attack against enemies with any condition. This class is very good for putting on vulnerabilities, so that you're going to be looking at playing things like Chain Strike, getting the energy back, putting a vulnerability, and then just breaking the monster's legs. And can you imagine just going up to Cthulhu and saying, your money is late with this baseball bat? You have to just imagine the nerves of steel you'd have to be walking up to a great old one with a baseball bat saying, okay, it's time to pay up. This card is incredible, and once you can start controlling whether you're lucky or jinxed and the ability to put on lots of vulnerabilities, this card becomes absolutely savage. Just getting 5 damage in the early stages of the game that doesn't take up any energy after you've committed, that's effectively 10 damage for 2 energy. It's a little bit more complicated than that because you have to get the status effects down. However, in multiplayer, other people can be putting down status effects. Characters like the Sorcerer or the Seer can just randomly put bleeds on things, and then you can go ahead and baseball bat them for 4 damage. So really, really good card. Huge fan of this. This is a card that I'm aggressively looking for in the early stages of the game. So when you're playing through, you get your reward cards. They pop out like this. Then you can spend a gold or a sanity to add a 4th card. If you get duplicates, they get shuffled back into the deck. So you always have 3 different options to choose from. I'm going to be aggressively spending my coins trying to find a baseball bat in the early stages of the game, because this card is just that good. Next up, we have a melee attack or defense. It's a 2 energy card. It's Hustle Luck. Attack 2 and defense 2, so we're getting 4 points of stats for 2 energy, which is great. It's exactly what we're looking for. If we're lucky, we put on a vulnerability and we switch to Jinx. This sounds really bad. However, it's part of being able to control which state you're in. There are certain cards that actually give you a benefit that's bigger if you are jinxed versus if you are lucky. So we will take a look at some of those cards later, but being able to get 4 points of stats just for playing this, and then no drawback if we're jinxed, but if we're also in the lucky, we get an extra point of damage. Then we're getting effectively 5 points of stats for 2 energy, which is incredible. In multiplayer, we can also make sure that we just end our turn on jinxed if there's nothing else that cares about us being lucky. So we've played all our chain strikes, we've done a bunch of combos, and then we just go ahead and play this. We don't really care if we're jinxed at that point, and somebody else can take advantage of the vulnerability. Hustle Luck is a great card, and it gives you control over your fate, which is going to work in tandem with things like your baseball bat, where you can, for example, play Hustle Luck, get that vulnerability, you go to Jinx, we can play our coin, go back to Lucky, and then baseball bat something for 5, giving us a damage output of 7 and 2 defense for 2 energy. And that's not bad. That's not bad at all. If we are on the betting side, this 2 energy Impose Respect is a pretty good card. It's a simple bet card that gives us attack 3. 3 for 2 energy is not great. However, we have a pretty big range on our success. If we roll between a 5 or a 9, we get attack 5 off of this card, which is greater than its energy cost. So this is really, really good if we are rolling. Good card to have if we have things like weighted dice or things to change our dice rolls. If we fail the roll, so that means we roll anything that isn't a 5 or a 9, or in between 5 or a 9, I should say that correctly. If we roll anything that isn't 5 to 9, it's a fail. And then we get attack 1 and a vulnerability, which is still pretty useful if we're playing the baseball bat build, because we get to put that vulnerability on. We end up losing a ton of value. We end up losing 2 points of stats, but it's not a massive drawback when we can get that vulnerability down, especially if we're lucky, and then we're already swinging up value with our baseball bat. Next, let's take a look at the uncommon cards. So we're going to take a look at a range of 3 cards here. The first one being for the betting strategy, the Optimal Environment. This is a 1 energy permanent skill, so after we play it, we just leave it in front of us for the rest of the fight. At the end of the fight, it gets shuffled back into our deck, and we'll have to play it again in the next fight. But this one's really interesting. When you lose a bet, you regain a sanity, you put a vulnerability on all enemies, which is very powerful, and you draw a card. So one of the biggest drawbacks of the betting strategy is that you pay energy to play the effect, and then if you lose the roll, you get less than what you should have got for that energy, and you've given up the card to do it. So it's the opportunity cost that you could have just been playing something else. This card kind of helps flip that a little bit by giving you back your sanity, which is helpful if you've been losing it or you've been more aggressively trading your sanity for some of your other effects. And you also get to draw the card to replace it. And it also sets up that vulnerability, which gives you the extra points of damage. It makes it pretty good if you're playing the risky bet strategy, where you may end up failing more of your rolls because the ranges are much smaller. And you can then set your team up with lots of vulnerabilities. You get to keep drawing cards, which means you keep doing stuff. This is a pretty good card. It comes in the uncommon, so we get it a little bit later. We need to know that we're in betting before we start seeing our uncommon cards for me to consider this. it comes way too late for me to decide to suddenly then go back into a betting strategy. So if I've decided at the start of the game I'm going bets, then I'm aggressively looking for optimal environment. And I'm going to be looking for those risky bet cards. I would find it very, very difficult to be in a choose your fate build and then try and switch into optimal environment to make this card work. This is a really good card though if you are in the betting strategy. Next up is a card that just always works. I'm a huge fan of this. The Joker is just a 2 energy melee attack defense card. It's just choose attack 5 or defense 5. Ton of stats for 2 energy, really, really good. Then we get dealt 1 damage or we lose a sanity, but the value that we're getting from this is just really, really high. We've got full control over it, and we can even choose if we've got more health or if we've got more sanity, which of these 2 drawbacks that we're looking to take on board. Really, really good card, and if your deck is kind of lacking a little bit of that oomph, this is great. There are certain boss encounters where being able to choose 5 defense can just protect you for an entire turn, and attack 5 is also pretty strong for bosses that have access to creatures that you need to remove. Lastly, as part of our uncommon rewards, we're going to take a look at Ignore Fate. Ignore Fate is a 1 energy that discards for 2 energy. That's what that blue flame tells us. We get +1 energy when we discard it. It's a skill. We change our luck and we gain a health. So we do the change our luck and then we get the effect. That's the key thing that you need to know for this. So this is where you might want to, for example, be jinxed before you play this. If you're lucky, you draw free cards. If you are jinxed, you gain free energy. This card is absolutely nuts. It gives us control over a bunch of our effects. We can suddenly go from Jinx to Lucky, we draw free cards, we get a health back, and then we can be playing Chain Strikes. This is really, really good. Or if we've got like quite a heavy hand and we don't care about being Jinx, we can go ahead and just take that free energy for this, which gives us way more than if we would have discarded it for energy. Really, really good card, and you can get multiples of this. I always want these in my deck in my Choose Fate, because what I'm trying to do is play cards that turn me to the Jinxed status effect, and that you can do that, for example, with the card we looked at earlier, which is attack 2, defense 2, put a vulnerability on the enemy. Play this, switch to Lucky, draw free cards, baseball bat for 5. And we're getting through our deck very, very quickly when we're playing Ignore Fates and drawing free cards. If we keep our deck nice and slim, I like to shoot for about 18 cards by the time I get to the end of Act 1. This gives us the opportunity to get through our deck twice when we're fighting the Great Old Ones, because we get up to 6 rounds to fight them. And this card helps us get through that deck very, very quickly and means that we can have more control over what's happening. Ignore Fate, one of my favorite cards in the entire Gambler kit. And now for those who want to venture through Act 2, we're going to take a look at 3 rare cards. There are quite a few, there are 7 more that I'm also not going to spoil, but we hope these give you a little bit of an insight on what you can expect from Act 2 onwards and the kind of power level that we're looking at, as our evaluations for trying to get 2 points of stats per energy go wildly out the window with this. Banker Always Wins is a 1 energy permanent skill. If you win a bet, regain a health and a sanity. If we lose a bet, we put vulnerability on all enemies. Just incredible. It basically means even if we lose the dice, we're getting an extra 2 points of stats on that card, which may make it fall within range. Anytime we win the bet, so simple bet cards are going to be very, very good for this, we're getting sustain. And there's no limit on the number of times this can be used in a turn. If we've built our deck in a way where we can just bet, we can effectively start regaining quite a few stats. And then if we're winning the bets, we're also getting way more for our stats that we would normally get for our energy cost. So this is a really good one if you're in that betting strategy. Obviously pretty useless if you decide to go with a Change Your Fate build and you don't have many bet cards. But if you're in betting, this card is absolutely top tier. Love this card. Next up, we have Under the Radar, which is a 0 energy that discards for 1 energy. I mean, you're not going to be discarding this, that would be pretty insane, but you can in the event that you need to. Permanent skill with 3 uses, so you get to use it 3 times before you discard it and then have to replay it. But again, it costs 0 energy, so when you redraw it. This is draw 2 cards when you play a bet card. Doesn't matter if you lose, you always get to draw 2 cards. This makes the betting strategy much, much more reliable because we're going to be getting through our deck regardless of what happens. And when we combine it with some of our other effects that we could potentially have access to, where we're losing bets or applying vulnerabilities, we're drawing more cards, we can just cycle through our deck very, very quickly. This card is very good. It's not once per turn, so we can just go ahead and potentially draw 6 cards in a turn if we go ahead and play 3 bet cards. Really, really good if you're in that strategy. Again, it's one of those ones where you can't, by the time you get one of these rare cards, which would be after you beat the first Great Old One, you're not really going to have time to pivot your deck. So these are like absolute cherry toppers effectively on your already built successful betting deck. But they're very, very, very good. If we just don't want to worry about what our fate is, rolling dice, or any of that other nonsense, and we're just looking for something that gets the job done. There's 2 energy marked cards. It's just a melee attack for 9 damage. No drawbacks, no worries, no ifs, no ands, no buts. You can just go ahead and throw that marked card straight in a ghoulie's face for 9 damage, which will absolutely obliterate most of the smaller enemies. Probably up to servants are going to get absolutely decked by marked cards. Excellent card, very, very consistent. You get to add a lot of consistency to your otherwise what could be a difficult to control deck just by playing something like marked cards. I like it, it's simple, and it does what you need it to do in the Gambler. Really, really good card. But as you can see, there's definitely ways of pulling you into either build. Just key tip for this class, decide which of those builds you want to be in before you start choosing your reward cards, because it's very hard to shift between the two. Lastly, I want to talk about a special card. This card we get in the event that we've completed the game and we want to start adding difficulty. So we beat the game on normal, we beat the game on nightmare, and then we decide we're going to start adding new rules and making it harder. We get access to this much better class relic, Maggie's Notebook, which gives us a higher health pool, higher sanity pool. At the start of the round, we get to roll dice, and we get to add or deduct 1 from the result, which gives us a wide range on being lucky versus being jinxed. Just all around, very, very solid, and means that we're going to be lucky, maybe just as much as we're jinxed. And we've also got the options of choosing our fate, but we start with that higher pool of sanity and health, which makes it much, much more bearable. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the Gambler strategy. We'd love to hear your bad beat stories, so you can tell us about all of the crazy dice rolls and everything that went wrong in your games. Also, we'd love to hear it when you win big. Tell us when you are slapping monsters down. Give other players some tips, and we're looking forward to seeing you for more videos in the future. But for now, if you could just shoot us a subscribe so you'll be the first to know when these next videos for the classes come out, and we'd love to keep delivering you great content. So for now, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.